Alright, let's do this one last time.
Wealth, fame, power. Gold Roger, the king of the pirates, attained this and everything else the world had to offer. And his dying words drove countless souls to the seas.
You want my treasure? You can have it. I left everything I gathered together in one place. Now you just have to find it.
These words lured men to the Grand Line in pursuit of dreams greater than they'd ever dared to imagine. This is the time known as the Great Pirate Era.
Yo! Don't give it up, Luffy. Don't give it up, Zolo. Don't give it up, Oda. Give it up.
Hello, shitiots. It's me, Donkey Boy, resident sleeper extraordinaire and massive One Piece fan. Oh, did I mention that I like One Piece? Well, I love One Piece. And if anything could show just how much I love One Piece, it would be the community who shares that similar love with me. I mean, we got Uzumaki Khan, Of course, we also have the GOAT, Arthur of the Library of Ohara, Mr. Morge, who might still be a little infamous on his theory about the raid, but continuously comes out with great analysis videos, and my personal favorite, Tekking 101, who has supported me ever since I've caught up to One Piece, and I still watch his videos to this day. Alright, it's been a journey and a half, but today I decided to make my debut One Piece analysis video. And what is it gonna be about? Red-haired Shanks, my absolute favorite character of One Piece. Who is this mysterious man, and why has he only appeared in less than 30 chapters? Is he a fraud? Is he a hockey man? Is he evil?
Warning, this is a video that pertains to the entirety of One Piece and is based off the current 1096 chapters of One Piece. It's also going to be an in-depth look at Shanks from the perspective of the manga, so it might end up being a little long.
This video will also have spoilers, you dumbasses, so don't get mad at me when you learn that Shanks is actually a...
Viewer discretion is advised. P.S. The use of manga panels and other One Piece properties are used in a transformative way in this video. The use of copyrighted material falls under fair use according to the YouTube guidelines, as I use One Piece properties for commentary purposes.
We start our analysis in a village. This is a small seaport village. At the port, a pirate ship has been anchored for a year or so. A wind is blowing from the east over this peaceful village.
Oi, Luffy! 何する気だ?
これは遊び半分なんかじゃない。もうあったまきた。証拠を見せてやる。
Okay, stop.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of Shanks' lore, I'm going to address a very key part of One Piece: tone. Coincidentally, tone dials show up later in the story as a relevant artifact, but we're talking about literary elements here. Tone is the character or attitude in which things are expressed or portrayed. So with that in mind, let's look into Chapter 1 of One Piece. Romance Dawn starts off with the legendary exodus of the late Pirate King. It's dark, but it's not dreary, and just when you turn the page, you realize that adventure is just around the corner. Now, I love praising Oda as much as the next guy, but the reason for this exercise is to show you just how meaningful tone can be. So, imagine you pick up One Piece for the first time. You flip through the pages, you're getting excited, and after everything you've just been shown, you get plopped in this measly little village called Fuchsia Village. With everything out in the open, this raw reaction to a world untold is similar to a certain protagonist, but we're here to talk about this man. Screw being marked with flames, Shanks' first appearance is marked with laughter. And this simple interaction cannot be understated, especially concerning recent developments within the story. However, in the context of Chapter 1, this is how we're introduced to the relationship between our protagonist and our buddy Shanks. Shanks is a lowbrow, swashbuckling pirate captain. This is not only portrayed with his introduction, but his own crew and how he interacts with Luffy. If the late Pirate King was some legendary criminal that commanded a gallery of rogues, then the red-haired pirates were nothing like them. Sure, they roamed the seas for plunder and adventure, but the place they chose as their base exemplifies their main MO, drinking and partying. Still, all the same, a young Monkey D. Luffy idolized the pirates, and even still holds a strong connection with their captain. Despite the strong urge that draws Luffy to take to the seas at this time, Shanks adamantly denies access to this wish. Luffy would be unable to board the red-haired pirate's ship as long as Shanks was the captain, this being the first command we ever heard from him. On top of all of that, Shanks continued his belligerent teasing towards the young child. Shanks' right-hand man and the bar owner trust Shanks' decisions, despite the relationship between Luffy and Shanks being downright disrespectful. Without a moment to consider any possibilities, the villain of the week walks in. Higuma the Mountain Bandit appears with a different level of disrespect. He shoots his mouth off to men he's never met and demands alcohol, which circumstantially has been drunk up by all the pirates. Shanks obviously loves grog, and offers an olive branch in the form of a bottle that in anger gets thrown right back into his face. Higuma wants to be feared, and yet Shanks unwavered and right in front of the villain offers to clean the mess up. Upon feeling ignored, Higuma trashes the bar and exits the scene, but not before calling the whole band of pirates cowards. Higuma, having the last word, left the pirates speechless, until they all burst out laughing. Neither respect or reputation seems to be important to these pirates, and in response, a young Monkey D. Luffy finally erupts with anger. He had marked his own face to match the once esteemed and respected pirate captain. Shanks then brings up again this gap between himself and Luffy, which is seemingly more than just age. He explains that needless killing doesn't make a man. Obviously, Luffy, being just 7 years of age, is not satisfied with some half-assed explanation from a man doused in liquor. He turns his back to Shanks and begins to walk away, but Shanks tries to draw Luffy back in when he grabs his arm to reveal that he had accidentally eaten a devil fruit, a fruit that curses the consumer and a treasure that Shanks and his crew had recently acquired. Now we fast forward a little bit in time when Shanks is on another voyage and hasn't returned yet. Luffy is eagerly awaiting his return when he gets into trouble with a familiar face. Higuma, in order to uphold his reputation, or whatever small-time criminals care about, parades his own version of teasing Luffy throughout Windmill Village. Luffy, being made of rubber now, can take a considerable beating, and again a dissatisfied Higuma takes another drastic action. Suddenly, small-time thugs become big-time executioners when Luffy's head makes it to an impromptu chopping block. However, fate shines bright on the young boy as Shanks ominously enters the fray. Of course, Higuma pays them no mind, he isn't afraid. Until revenge is paid 100-fold as Lucky Rube blasts away a bandit pointing a gun at his captain. Before Shanks could even consider entering the confrontation, Ben Beckman offers to end the conflict as a whole. Short work is made, and the only thing that stands between Shanks and Luffy is Higuma himself. In an almost comedic fashion, Higuma disappears into smoke, and Shanks begins to worry. We now find ourselves at sea, the place Luffy wishes to escape to most. Yet, the circumstances are less than favorable, as he's eaten a devil fruit and finds himself sailing under a criminal he doesn't respect. Suddenly, he gets thrown overboard. Yet, even that is the least of his worries, as the king of the coast appears. This gargantuan sea beast eats Higuma and the boat he rode on whole, and turns his gaze to Luffy. Thankfully, Shanks appears and saves Luffy. This act of courage and strength cost Shanks his left arm, leaving only a vulnerable moment between the boy and the pirate. Despite the tragedy of it all, the story isn't over yet. We now find ourselves a little bit more into the future as we catch the farewell between the two characters. Luffy understands his shortcomings, but adamantly believes he will one day surpass Shanks and the red-haired pirates. In their final moments, Luffy is bestowed Shanks' trusty straw hat and a promise to one day return the hat once Luffy achieves his goals. I know summarizing Chapter 1 shouldn't have taken that long, but it's important to remember that despite the anime not placing importance on this event, it is literally what One Piece starts with. On top of that, like many others, I believe that early One Piece holds a lot of importance now going into the final saga. So let me reel us back in with a question. What does Chapter 1 of One Piece reveal about Shanks? I mean, if we're being real here, his character so far has been barely explored or developed. And this is much like other characters of the story. Shanks' lack of change is proof he holds some sort of conviction, and that he's accepted himself and has a specific goal in mind. However, this goal is never revealed to us or even to Luffy, and Shanks even finds more interest in the young boy's dream. If we're being even more real here, Shanks' participation in Luffy's life is more of a mentor than that of a familial nature. I mean, Shanks' lesson is just that you should understand the risk that lies on the seas and that he'd need an even greater will than he had previously shown to conquer it. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes of our analysis, we're going to summarize quickly the basics of Shanks. Shanks is a pirate captain with a great will and follows in the path of the era created by Gold Roger. His crew, despite being party fanatics, consist of similarly strong-willed pirates. The main crew is made up of 10 main members. Shanks as the captain, Ben Beckman as first mate, Lucky Roo, Yasopp, Lime Juice, Bong Punch and Monster, Building Snake, Hongo, and of course Gab. There are other members, of course, of the red-haired pirates, but we will cover them as the video needs. Continuing with facts we should know, Shanks' Jolly Roger replaces the thigh bones with swords and has his signature 3-eye scar. Of course, Shanks also has a rule against hurting a friend of his, which is mentioned towards Higuma. And lastly, I'd like to mention all the instances where Shanks' actions go against what he is capable of or prove that he's hiding something. Alright, ladies and gents, from here on out we're going to analyze all the notable times Shanks appears in the manga, which, spoiler alert, are few and far between, though I do believe we can draw some conclusions on what Shanks' purpose will be when he finally meets Luffy. In the East Blue Saga, Shanks appears twice. However, I'm going to mention a third time Shanks' importance is brought to the forefront. Shanks reappears first in Chapter 19 in a flashback for the flashy man himself, Buggy the Clown. Within Buggy's flashback, we learn that Shanks has been a pirate for a very long time, even when he was a kid. He sailed on the same boat as Buggy, and they were practically brothers. Despite this, Buggy hates Shanks because, similarly to Luffy, Shanks' actions led Buggy to eating a devil fruit, thus abandoning any pirate treasure he could find on the seafloor. This flashback being comedic in every way, might actually be a front on Buggy's part. I don't believe myself that Buggy the genius jester hates his brother for something as coincidental as gagging Buggy with a devil fruit. Sorry, that sounded a little erotic. However, I do believe the discord between the two pirates has recently been revealed, and of course we will get to that. The next instance is with Usopp, and while he doesn't appear directly, his mere mention is important. As Luffy comes to comfort Usopp, he reveals that Usopp's father is still sailing with Shanks. It's important to note that not only has Luffy adopted a similar personality as Shanks, but he has descendants from his crew. The last time Shanks appears in the East Blue Saga is after Luffy effectively conquers all of East Blue. In Chapter 96, Mihawk arrives at an island that suspiciously looks like Sphinx Island. Through the events of the chapter, we catch a glimpse at Mihawk, the world's greatest swordsman, meeting up with red-haired Shanks. They mention fighting each other, however, the main event happens to be Luffy. For the final chapter of this saga, we learn that Shanks is more renowned than Luffy had ever imagined, even being able to go toe-to-toe with the world's greatest swordsman, though that was likely when he still had 2 arms. Furthermore, we can confirm that while Luffy was determined to meet Shanks again, that very same man had long expected and hoped for him to reach his own goals. Now we've made it to Paradise, the first portion of the Grand Line, and we don't get to see Shanks for another 138 chapters. Unfortunately. Chapter 234 is extremely important, but I want to include a portion from 233 as well. Not only is Chapter 233 iconic because of the sky, but because it also introduces us to the 5 elders, the Gorosei. Strangely enough, the 5 elders happen to be talking about Shanks. Ironically, the 5 elders also find Shanks' behavior strange, and comment about a possible meeting with Whitebeard. While this is going on, a bounty poster of Luffy lies before them. This scene is always great, but let's not fall victim to the reading comprehension devil. What we can gather is that Shanks can be and is monitored by the Gorosei. However, they don't know every detail about them. We know this because they don't seem to know yet the connection between Luffy and Shanks. Also, their monitoring appears to be a special intelligence task specifically to monitor big pirates like we see with CP0 later in the series. Speaking of later, let's get into Chapter 234 where we actually get to see our glorious king. Chapter 234 is titled Please Remember, and of course a similar phrase is said by Lafitte, a member of Blackbeard's crew in the latter half of the chapter. There, he urges the world government to keep their eyes open for a potential new warlord of the sea, though our attention is drawn to a supposedly separate part of the story. In Chapter 234, we first find ourselves at the introduction of a great pirate known as Whitebeard, who has been sent a message from none other than red-haired Shanks. The carrier of the message is a young man by the name of Rockstar. However, the message falls on deaf ears, as Whitebeard states that if Shanks wants to send a message to him, he can do it in person. Graciously, the author provides a quick look at the pirate captain currently stationed on a winter island. Through this quick scene, we learn that this is a scenario that is unfavorable to Shanks, which is remarked by his right-hand man, Ben Beckman. Beckman states that the world government is sure to interfere, a caution that also falls on deaf ears as Shanks rallies his crew to meet the infamous strongest man in the world. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Here we learn that Shanks knows both the world's greatest swordsman and the strongest man in the world. Shanks obviously holds a very high position, seemingly furthering the distance between our lovable main character and the man he strives to meet. Yet, Luffy already has a connection with Whitebeard, as his brother is a 2nd Division commander on his crew. Here we had many theorists believe that Luffy would meet Shanks before he accomplished his goal in finding the One Piece. I probably felt the same way around this part of the story myself, because, unknown to the main cast of characters, the world is continuing to move outside of their own ship, which comes full circle when you realize this is the same chapter that Blackbeard sets his sights on Luffy. While I'd love to describe why Jaya as a whole did so much for the One Piece narrative, we must continue. Our next stop in the story is a grueling 200 chapters to chapter 434. This chapter is the first chapter entirely devoted to showing red-haired Shanks, which is aptly named Whitebeard and Red Hair. The chapter opens up with Navy headquarters observing or intercepting the fact that red-haired Shanks has reached Whitebeard. Obviously, they have been monitoring both pirates' movement the whole time. Upon Shanks boarding the Moby Dick, Jozu and Marco warns the others of the Whitebeard crew about the overwhelming pressure exerted by this foreign captain. Without delay, the next page shows Shanks using Conqueror's Haki as he makes his way to Whitebeard, a feat he shrugs off as a precautionary measure before boarding an enemy ship. Before anything else, Whitebeard says that looking at Shanks reminds him of scars he's gotten from someone, likely or rather intentionally leaving out the details about this unspecified him. Before negotiations between the two great men start, Whitebeard laments at the show of power Shanks used, a sentiment that is only rectified by the passing of some medicinal water. Before taking a swig, Whitebeard wonders about the origination of this special medicinal water, which Shanks delightfully responds with the answer that it comes from his hometown in the West Blue. The drink isn't half bad, and lets Whitebeard reminisce on the characters that once ruled an older sea. Roger, Garp, and Sengoku are all mentioned in this momentary pause of recollection before Whitebeard states that Shanks has made great progress after leaving Gold Roger's ship. A monumental discovery to everyone in the fandom that is also supported by the fact that Buggy had also sailed on the same ship as well. Shanks then also reminisces on the fact that Buggy had refused to sail with him on that fateful day after the death of Gold Roger. Then we get a few more lore reveals when it's mentioned that Shanks once had a duel with Hawkeye that had shocked Whitebeard, and that he hadn't revealed yet to Whitebeard who he had given his left arm in battle to. An inquiry that Shanks only responds to that he had given it up for the sake of the new generation. After catching up with each other, Shanks comes back to the idea of scars, pointing at a signature left eye scar that Luffy had tried to mimic in the first chapter, a scar which he attributes to none other than Blackbeard. He despises the idea that this scar wasn't from a major battle or a great adventure, but a man who hid himself to make a strike upon him, a scenario that Shanks thinks is happening again, all behind Whitebeard's back. Shanks urges the great Whitebeard to stop Ace from chasing after this deceitful man. Whitebeard returns Shanks' feelings with a similar contempt, but with a sense of responsibility and honor, claiming that he must be held accountable. The two share another long swig before the two men finally clash, causing the clouds to split and negotiations to be similarly disconnected. Okay, before we analyze the whole chapter, we must draw our attention to the end of the chapter where the discussed events occur before our very eyes. We see Ace and Blackbeard meet, a rather unfortunate turn of events that precede the current discussion being held. After everything we witness, a sour vibe fuels this interaction. What can we conclude about these events? Well, first, the world government, despite being previously mentioned, is nowhere to be seen, and instead we get the Navy reconnaissance of the two pirates meeting. Whatever was supposed to be an obstacle to Shanks from the world government hasn't been shown yet. Next, we learn that Shanks and Buggy were previously on the Pirate King's ship, making the importance of Shanks even more evident because we haven't been aware of any other active crew members of the Pirate King's crew besides Crocus, who we know around this time as having some relations to Gold Roger. Regardless, Shanks is made out to look like just a pirate apprentice, meaning he wasn't a major member of the crew, and he had only sailed on Gold Roger's ship as a boy. We also learned that despite Buggy's recollection appearing in a negative connotation, Shanks really does hold a special relationship with Buggy, making them old friends rather than enemies. Another heavily debated detail presented is a duel with Hawkeye. This duel implies a battle of comparable strength and/or ideals, as both men emerged unscathed and alive. While I hate to get into power scaling, Shanks also wields a blade despite Mihawk being named the world's greatest swordsman, meaning that it's either a title granted by the world government, or that Shanks isn't a true swordsman and rather fights in an uncharacteristic way compared to other swordsmen. We also learned another reason as to why Shanks saved Luffy. He wasn't just a friend or someone Shanks liked, his arm was also part of a bet he made with Luffy in the name of a new generation. A sentiment I'm sure can be shared with Whitebeard. Likely, the most important detail out of all of this is about Blackbeard. The signature scar that can even be found on Shanks' Jolly Roger is one that he received from Blackbeard. Blackbeard and Luffy have already been characterized as polar opposites, so the fact that two of the most important battle wounds received by Shanks are represented by the both of them is very interesting. Shanks was marked by Blackbeard, and Shanks also gave his arm to save Luffy. Both took something from Shanks, and as mentioned earlier, Shanks obviously holds something to either pirate. The ending of the chapter shows a clash of great magnitude, and a feat that has been replicated and understood as the Clash of Conquerors Haki. However, the reason I included the last part of the chapter is due to the timeliness of the meeting of Blackbeard and Ace. Many people have taken this opportunity to theorize that Shanks has some sort of advanced future sight or the ability to see into the future, as Shanks always knows exactly where he needs to be, or the fact that he made the biggest and most important bet of all when he challenged Luffy. I don't agree with this thought process, as future sight was something that hadn't been explored or built upon since Mantra was explained in chapter 278. And the ability to see into the future has only been seen in one other character, which was revealed in Fishman Island with Madame Charlie. If Shanks has future sight, I doubt it would be at the level that some think he has, or it isn't the main ability that is used by Shanks. In fact, with One Piece Film Red, we learn that Shanks has the opposite of future sight, and is labeled the Killer of Observation Haki. However, I wouldn't hold it against others who claim this title as a tell that Shanks has a far superior look into the future we haven't been shown before. Aside from this, chapter 434 still leaves many details about Shanks out of the picture, and we are left with even more questions. The biggest one being who gave Whitebeard the scars that he's reminded of when he sees Shanks. It's possible that it lies in the names given to us when Whitebeard is reminiscing. However, the shroud behind the name Whitebeard withheld implies Shanks knows who Whitebeard is referencing, but does not wish to speak the name out loud. This name is likely something we wouldn't learn anytime soon, as the next time Shanks appears in the story is indirectly 72 chapters later when being referenced by the right-hand man of the late Pirate King. Chapter 506 is a great chapter, as it shows the Straw Hat Pirates interacting with Silver's Rayleigh, a man with great exploits, who also claims a sentiment for the new generation in the passing of ages parallel to both Whitebeard and Shanks. It's revealed that Shanks had gained a lot from Gold Roger's passing, and that after meeting Luffy 10 years ago, Shanks had met with Rayleigh to tell of how similar the two men were. Shanks stated to Rayleigh that the words of Luffy were very similar to his late captain, expressing great curiosity for the boy. Through this subtle interaction, we continue to learn that Luffy and Gold Roger held similar feelings on the world and similar personalities, but the specific words of comparison are withheld for unknown reasons. I believe this plotline has only been continued directly in recent chapters. It's fairly obvious that while this piece of information is to highlight how special a person Luffy was to Shanks, the old pirate captain's crew, and potentially the whole world, it also brings into question what words were shared between the two. Nothing in Chapter 1 holds significance to this piece of information, but I believe Chapter 1060 gives us a clue as to what the conversation between Shanks and Rayleigh might be referring to. In Chapter 1060, it is revealed that while Luffy wants to become King of the Pirates, he also holds another dream, one that is revealed he had already shared with Shanks. I believe Luffy's true and final dream are the words that Shanks is referencing here. After this moment, we get 2 more pieces of indirect information on Shanks in the next 50 chapters. He is first mentioned in chapter 533, where it is revealed that there is Navy intelligence to suggest that in response to the Paramount War, Shanks has started battle with Kaido to prevent him from interfering. His next subtle appearance is in chapter 552, where he is seen in a flashback with Ace. Here we see Ace deliberately seek out Shanks on another winter island to thank him for saving his little brother's life. Not much can be gathered from these inclusions in the story, especially when talking about Shanks. We get confirmation about his whereabouts after clashing with Whitebeard, and he seemingly marched towards another battle with another emperor, Kaido. Not only that, but we see that Shanks had previously met with Ace, meaning that the two acknowledged each other and shared a sentiment surrounding Luffy. It can be argued that even more questions can be raised from these moments than answers, further shrouding the man who we wish to know more about. Thankfully, we were blessed with another appearance shortly after. Here, we get to see his next and most influential appearance in the Paramount War. In the final moments of chapter 579, Shanks appears to stop Akainu from punching Kobe and to prevent the Navy from taking the life of Luffy. Thankfully, Shanks continues to appear in the story for the next chapter as well. After stopping the destructive magma dog that is Akainu, we get a reaction to Shanks' appearance in this war. He appears as a final element like Blackbeard, yet his intentions were to stop the conflict altogether. We see Garp and Sengoku recognize Shanks, and the Navy openly states that red-haired Shanks was just reported to be in open combat with Kaido, and a day later he shows his face in Marineford? The first action Shanks takes after blocking the blow from Akainu is picking up the straw hat he had once gifted to Luffy. He then urges Buggy to return it to its current owner, and explains to his crew that the time to meet Luffy is not at hand. This momentary ceasefire is not reciprocated by the admirals, who continue to gun for Luffy's head. Despite the admirals breaking through Shanks' line, he seems unfazed and Luffy escapes. Once Luffy is out of harm's way, Shanks greets Marco and Buggy. Of course, they share words with him before Shanks continues his feelings on that they should end the war before more casualties occur. Mihawk reacts similarly, retreating from a proposed battle against red-haired Shanks. In an amazing spread, we see that Shanks has rallied his whole crew to stand against the continued fighting. All these big players finally get to show off, and instantly, Shanks directs his attention to Blackbeard, challenging him to continue fighting while he's still there. Without a moment to lose, Blackbeard withdraws, claiming it's not the right time to fight him. After his first surrender, Shanks then turns his attention to everyone else, and urges them to withdraw to allow him to save face. A silence, unlike any other, filled the battlefield, until Shanks repeats his sentiment, claiming that he would bury Ace and Whitebeard in the wakes of their deaths. Through minimal outcry, Sengoku agrees and officially ends the war, claiming he'll take responsibility for it. Thus ended the greatest battle of the Great Pirate Age. Woo! That's a lot to take in, especially for weekly readers, so hopefully I can understand the meaning of this in terms of Shanks. So firstly, we come to understand that while the Navy is the world's protector and yada yada yada, their focus on this battle not only allowed Luffy and Blackbeard to break in and out of Impel Down, but also miss out on Shanks' movements. A blunder that is shown by the interception of the red-haired pirates in this monumental battle. However, this also means that Shanks' arrival was a surprise not just to the Navy, but anyone who has been observing him. Which raises the question, why was he there? I mean, obviously he wanted to protect the crew of a man he greatly respected, but why specifically did he choose to show up? Another thing we get no knowledge of is whether Shanks was aware that Ace was Gold Roger's son. Many of these questions remained unanswered. However, I'm sure we'll get to understand the further into One Piece we go. Shanks picking up the straw hat only to cast it back to Luffy furthers the idea that Shanks places great importance with the bond and promise he has with Luffy. The interaction between Buggy shows that he has no ill will towards his old compatriot, and the quick words to Marco shows respect and understanding, now that he must bear the burden of being the leader of the Whitebeard pirates. More interestingly, however, is the focus he continues to hold for Blackbeard. Despite this, his desire to end the war takes precedence over old feuds as Shanks allows Blackbeard to retreat. Fate seemingly shines upon Blackbeard as he is allowed to escape by not only the Navy, but Shanks. Shanks seems to be honor-bound to end the war, whether it's because of his relationship with Whitebeard or maybe entirely something else. Before I get to put my own theorist hat on, Shanks then openly states that his objective is to bury the dead of this battle, and Sengoku resigns himself to this fact. While I don't think there's anything too significant with this exchange, it's important to remember the position that these two men have. Sengoku is the fleet admiral of the world government, and Shanks is a Yonko. Shanks being an active participant in the outcome of the war, and Sengoku bending his knee to the wishes of a Yonko are both unbelievable outcomes. More questions after questions. But I believe both of these men acted on their own accord. Sengoku doesn't want to prolong a war where destruction is sure to continue, especially since he's the current leader of the Navy, and Shanks is acting on behalf of the men he wishes to protect. I think it's beautiful that in a moment of war, key players can still rely on their emotions to make good decisions and stop bloodshed. Though, that doesn't mean I still don't have a mountain of questions. Okay, before I start talking more about the actions at the end of the Paramount War, we should draw our attention to chapter 590, when we get to see Shanks' marvelous face once again. We continue to see the aftermath of the war, and catch a glimpse of Shanks fulfilling his promise in burying both Ace and Whitebeard. We see Shanks accepting the fact that Sengoku understood the respect commanded by Whitebeard, an understanding he shares with Marco. We then see the first internal monologue we've ever gotten out of Shanks. He shares sympathy to Luffy and tells him how Ace and Gold Roger shared similar willingness to protect others. He parts with the idea that great men can experience grief and shed tears, but you can only become a great man when you overcome it. Ah, Oda, you goat. You always seem to drive me right back. Regardless, Shanks doesn't really build upon his character in this scene, as we already know he's a great man. Though I will say that this scene shows that Shanks understands at a deeper level why Sengoku respected his wishes. Believe it or not, Shanks does not appear in the story for the longest stretch after this chapter. He next appears in chapter 903, for literally 2 panels where he's like, "Look, we'll be meeting soon, Luffy," which is such post-time skip Oda bait that it pissed me off the first time I ever saw it. What can we gather from this, Oda? Though, he answered our prayers for more Shanks and in turn giving us the most controversial scene surrounding Shanks. Chapter 907 is titled The Empty Throne, a reference to the throne in Marijois that is purposely left empty as a show of democracy between the kingdoms of the world government, though it might refer to another empty throne. In this chapter we're also introduced to Roxy xebec and the Rocks Pirates, a force the world government is keeping their eye out for now that Kaido and Big Mom are becoming involved with each other again. However, the most tantalizing aspect of this chapter is of course Shanks having a secret meeting with the Gorosei, and it happens to be about a certain pirate. Prior to the stretch of chapters that make up the Reverie arc, a statement was released by Oda claiming that he would be introducing a lurking legend and a great obstacle to the Straw Hat Pirates. Now many have already deduced that is likely referring to Rocks or Emu, though I'd like to start my theory by diverging from that thought path. Obviously, all 3, Rocks, Emu, and Shanks, can be categorized as lurking legends, but the word introduce might signify the new and upcoming threat that this figure might represent to the Straw Hats. If I may, he's literally One Piece's own lurking legend, and even if Oda was referring to Rocks or Emu, they both have a direct connection to Shanks. Before I elaborate on my theory, I want to say that I also believe that the pirate Shanks was referring to was Luffy. I'm almost 100% sure of it, though it is likely that he also wanted to discuss Blackbeard, as he has a similar relationship with Blackbeard. Whoever Shanks wished to discuss with the world government, it's more than likely that whoever he wanted to talk about made him recently wish to have this conversation, as is made obvious by the Gorosei that they had to put time aside to have this open forum with the pirate. However, at this point, Shanks D. Rat has even more questions on his mountain than before. It's no surprise that so many people were shocked by this turn of events, because the closest we've got to an explanation was the reveal that Shanks is actually a celestial dragon. Like the little piece of information we have about the killer of observation haki, this also comes from One Piece Film Red, where the Gorosei comment about Uta, saying that if Uta is actually Shanks' daughter, by blood, she would be part of the Figureland family. And we will get to the actual Figureland person that is revealed. My theorist cap is nearly gonna blow. So let's compile the next few appearances of Shanks quickly. Shanks appears in the first flashback we've ever gotten to see Gold Roger in action, and appears sporadically between chapter 958 and 968. Here we see how Shanks, despite being a kid, readily accepted the role of being a pirate. We see lots of Shanks and Buggy together, further cementing the idea that they were actually, and practically, brothers on the King of the Pirates crew. My favorite part is seeing him laugh at Gold Roger as they are about to meet Odin and Whitebeard. Pushing past personal intrigue, the most important parts for this video are the fact that Blackbeard is the reason Shanks believes people from northern islands don't sleep, an idea that was passed down to Luffy. The man who dreams in the day is surely a dangerous one. We also learn that Gold Roger imparted some personal words to Shanks that caused some emotion within the young boy. Words that are withheld from us yet again. God damn you, Oda. There's not much we can gather from Shanks' appearance in this flashback other than what we had already known. If anything, it should cement the idea that Shanks is deeply influenced by Gold Roger, and they have a similar bond as Shanks and Luffy, if not a more tragic one. I believe that while Shanks had a meeting with the Gorosei, this flashback strikes discord to that fact. Shanks then shows his glorious now rat face in the waters just outside Wano in chapter 1054. Here we see him remembering how he had gotten the devil fruit that had been eaten by Luffy all those years ago. Whether Luffy eating the devil fruit was fate or not, we get more insight into Shanks and Luffy's relationship. Upon reminiscing a little, Shanks remembers that Bartolomeo, a follower of Luffy, had raised a ruckus in his territory. Without delay, Shanks reaches out to his right-hand man and asks if now's the time to go and claim the One Piece. This chapter is puzzling, especially when you consider what happens immediately in the next chapter. In chapter 1055, we get an incredible show of power when Shanks directs his Conqueror's Haki into Wano to stop Ryokyogu from interfering with the quote-unquote new era. So much action coming out of this lurking legend, I can't handle its awesomeness.
Eating a burger with no honey mustard. Eating a burger with no honey mustard.
From all of this, we can gather that Shanks understands the importance of Nika awakening, further intensifying the bond and importance Shanks must have for Luffy. Even though Shanks has a deep love for Luffy, he remains honor-bound by his status as a Yonko to not shrug off the influence of his new, younger Yonko impeding on his territory, and even despite this idea, he still feels bound to protect Luffy from any outside combatants after this victory. Questions and questions and words and words. Unsurprisingly, Shanks has become a more important figure in the story, landing him several appearances in the past 2 years. We even see him playing an active role with the participants of the last major war. Now we must draw our attention to his most recent appearances, in chapters 1059, 1076, and 1079. In chapter 1059, he appears as an aide to Marco of the Whitebeard pirates, delivering him back to Whitebeard's hometown at Sphinx Island. Next, in 1076, we see the red-haired pirates on Elbath in a local bar. Rockstar suddenly barges into the bar with a message that Captain Kidd has already attacked them, and this will likely turn out to be a fight. In Shanks' characteristic nonchalance, he prepares to face off against Eustace Kidd, ensuring that he won't let the battle reach the island. Shanks then asks Rockstar to send a message asking if Kid would rather leave his poneglyph rubbings and flee, or if he wishes to fight them now. A continuation of the story is shown again in 1079, when we are brought back to Elbaf, where the intensity between Kid and Shanks grows, or at least on the side that has something to prove. Anyway, Shanks is seen with the supposed fleet that even himself calls weak. Before entering battle with Kid, Shanks requests information from one of his shipmates about Blackbeard. Besides Blackbeard leaving his base, nothing of relevance is provided, but the shipmate passes a booklet supposedly giving information about Captain Kidd. In a split-second decision, Shanks requests Dory and Bragi to assume position and leaps into the fray before Captain Kidd can even launch any real attack. He literally one-shots him. We can see the Kidd pirates quickly surrender with their poneglyphs in hand before Dory and Bragi lay waste to the Victoria Punk. The Kidd pirates have been destroyed at the hands of Shanks and the giants of Elbaf. Huzzah! We did it!
We did it! We did it! Yay! Always team up! We did it!
Actually, we haven't compiled every moment with Shanks yet. Much like Captain Useless Mid here, I lack follow-through. I forgot Shanks' most recent appearance in Chapter 1082. Despite me stressing the importance of this appearance, he doesn't show up in the current events, rather we get to see Buggy's memories once more. In what I believe is either the 4th or 5th time we see the events immediately preceding the death of Gold Roger, we get even further clarification as to what happened between Shanks and Buggy that day. While we are currently in Buggy's loser era after creating Cross Guild, Buggy remembers what drove him on his path, and more importantly, what drove every pirate to take to the seas during the Great Pirate Era, the One Piece. In a you could almost miss it turn of events, it is revealed that Shanks originally had no desire to claim the treasure, even though he just missed it when he chose to stay behind with Buggy. Whether that was because he knew the truth already or he learned something else is still up for questioning. So, what can we conclude with all the information given? Still, nothing much. We know now that Shanks has officially entered the race for the One Piece, as he already has at least 2 road poneglyph rubbings, courtesy of the Kidd pirates. We also know that he takes being a pirate seriously, and doesn't hand out mercy, especially on the sea. He allies himself with the weak, or rather finds comfort in friends regardless of their strength. A characteristic, I might add, is similar to the world government. The Navy is the strength that is gifted to nations allied with the world government. So is Shanks somehow an extension of the world government? Does he act in a similar way because he's a celestial dragon? I confidently believe the answer is no. Shanks is obviously a pirate and takes pride in such. It's more than likely that being a celestial dragon is secondary to the man he is today, especially considering how he was treated and acted in Mary Joie. So, what's Shanks' motive? Where is he coming from? I'm not going to put my tinfoil straw hat on just yet, but I'm going to be making a few assumptions before going full crackpot theorist. I think that much like everything about One Piece, our expectations about Shanks will far surpass whatever we could think of. But I believe I can roughly estimate where Shanks stands. It's a blatant and more of a reoccurring element now that Shanks is a deeper character than we had ever realized. Shanks, despite having a connection with the Figureland family, was raised as a pirate. He grew up on a boat sharing space with a D-Clan member who likely acted as a paternal figure. He wouldn't share any values with celestial dragons, but why would he have a discussion with the Gorosei? Let's go back to how people have previously viewed Shanks, as it's important to note that, realistically, Shanks' character isn't far from our original assumptions. He carries a blade called Griffin, and the ancient depiction of griffins often pertains to guarding treasure or acting as a protector. What has Shanks protected and will be guarding? 2 questions that we can already answer. He has been a pseudo-protector of Luffy and is likely the man who will guard the One Piece. However, guarding the One Piece might refer to multiple things. Of course, this means he will stand in the way of anyone who will want to claim the treasure of his old pirate captain, but it also might refer to the players involved and the environment. Shanks might be amassing road poneglyphs as an attempt to become a challenge to the final players for the ancient treasure, but he has also acted as a controlling force as to not disrupt the equilibrium of the world. He ended the Paramount War, he urged Whitebeard not to chase after Blackbeard, and he protects others who are not able to protect themselves in this turbulent cycle of the world. So how does all of this relate to his appearance in Marijois? He was obviously there to create some sort of order before the One Piece world reaches this intense climax. What does all of this have to do with Luffy? And more importantly, what does all of this have to do with Nika? I think in an attempt to sway the world government away from interfering with Luffy, he wanted to remind the Gorosei that he is, for a lack of a better word, their insurance policy, the one with all the cards at the end of the day, and the one who will be facing off against Luffy. Which might be a confusing topic since Luffy is getting involved once again with the world government affairs after nearly being off by CP0. However, despite Nika being reawakened, the world government is no longer stressed about the outcomes that surround the Straw Hat Pirates. The main goals of the world government recapturing Egghead Island doesn't even include the Straw Hats, even though we know Nika poses a true threat to everything they stand for, an idea that is even further pressed with this issue. Even though they made it clear that the Straw Hat Pirates' involvement was unprecedented, it's a reach to say they were absolutely unaware of Straw Hat Luffy landing on Egghead Island. Furthermore, I doubt the world government wouldn't have held off in making the right move after they failed with nearly every objective they had in Wano. The world government has to have some sort of insurance. Part of it has to do with the ancient treasure of Marijois and the celestial dragons, but I believe Shanks stepped up to fill the role of protector on behalf of the world government. Whether this is to Shanks' own benefit to protect the new age should be heavily debated. I mean, if Shanks had to sacrifice not only his arm to protect Luffy, but his honor as a pirate, it might make Shanks one of the most nuanced characters of One Piece. Regardless, it all goes to show how much depth there is to every action Shanks takes. Getting back to our hypothetical, Shanks' proposal to the world government was likely one of assurance, or it could have even been a request he made. I suppose anything is possible given that he is in fact a celestial dragon. Requesting the world government to not act on this issue might well be in his ability, as even Don Quixote do Flamengo was able to skew the news with his own connections. Even though I have a strong belief in these assumptions of mine, I am undoubtedly going to need to jump through some hoops for this theory to hold up. Okay, I'm gonna let go, and I'm gonna put on the tinfoil straw hat. Shanks has an undeniable connection with the Norse god of war, Tyr. Shanks is missing an arm, he acts as a protector and a power of justice, especially in times of war, and he literally has the blood of the world's gods running through his veins, as well as being associated with the giants. It's insane to think that Oda deliberately showed that he does in fact hold a connection to the Elbaf giants, the race in One Piece that are based on Vikings and Norse mythology. So while this is another great illusion provided by Oda-sensei, it usually doesn't hold much weight within the story. But the connection is already there, so let's look into Norse mythology, as many have theorized that Ragnarok is an actual event that might occur in One Piece, or it might even refer to the final war. To sum up what happens, it's basically a war of worlds that ends in the destruction of the gods of old before the world of humans can start anew. What is Tyr's connection to Ragnarok? Well, while his connection is not as strong as the other participants in the event, I wish to draw attention to this idea of a bound monster and Fenrir. The story goes that Tyr loses his arm to the great wolf Fenrir in an attempt to bind the beast. The reason they were trying to bind Fenrir was to prevent him from fulfilling his role in Ragnarok. Tyr loses his arm, all because the gods tricked the beast into submission. However, the catch was that Fenrir requested Tyr's arm or hand, it's debated which one it is, into his mouth in case they were in fact tricking him. Now, it's all cool when you remember this may be a connection to Chapter 1, as Shanks gives up his arm for the chance of a better future. But I think that this makeshift insurance policy is referring to what's happening in the story now. If we pretend for a moment that the mythological beasts that are in fact the Gorosei represent Fenrir, it wouldn't be stretching it too far to say that Shanks might actually be sacrificing something to prevent their interference with One Piece's Ragnarok. Now, we know that the Gorosei are immortal, whether that's due to their powers or precise usage of the Op fruit, or if they're literal demons that take on the form of humans. They undeniably have a connection with souls. I want to say that it might be possible that Shanks literally made a deal with the devil to get the world government off of Luffy's case. Now that you know how far I'm reaching, it might be important to note that there are actually 3 bound monsters that precede the events of Ragnarok. Now, it would be amazing if Fenrir represented the most holy dogs that serve the kingdom of gods. The 3 monsters might actually be referring to the ancient weapons. These 3 mythological calamities are Jormungandr, the world serpent that has actually been referenced in One Piece as the blood-stained snake, who might be Uranus. Hel, being the female deity of the underworld, might actually be Poseidon, a woman tasked with protecting the underwater kingdom of Fishman Island. And now we get back to Fenrir, a deity defined by his strength and power, and is bound because of his potential to ruin the world, which sounds mighty similar to how Pluton is held beneath Wano. Okay, before I sound even more batshit insane, let's go back to Tyr. In the battle that becomes Ragnarok, he fights another wolf named Garm, who he kills and tragically, he also falls victim to. Garm, who is a wolf associated with Hel, is often interpreted and compared to a Cerberus. Now, where do we often attribute the Cerberus in the story of One Piece? The Jolly Roger with 3 heads that signals death is the flag of Blackbeard. Now, again, I'm not saying any of this has any grounds in One Piece, as there are so many stories and mythologies that are referenced and used in One Piece that don't usually follow the conventional story arcs. So let's just say, for the sake of my theory, that Shanks has entered some sort of binding vow in order to uphold order and protect Luffy, Nika, and the One Piece. Now we've come back to the realm of sanity, to address the many holes in my theory. Firstly, what exactly could Shanks have said about Luffy to the Gorosei? Obviously, he revealed his connection to the young pirate, and that he is in fact in possession of the mythical Zoan fruit Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, which always is a handful to say. The Gomu Gomu no Mi is still restricted by the curse received by all devil fruits, that is, to sink in the sea. Shanks himself knows this fact better than anyone else, and maybe he knows who the devil of the sea truly is. In order to appease this sea devil, he made a promise, or rather he took on the will of someone else to face Nika head on. Now, I'm not saying he's being controlled or that all celestial dragons have an unnatural connection to Emu. I'm just saying that the will passed down to Shanks is still unknown, and will play a critical role in understanding Shanks' actions. Now, that idea may come as a surprise to some, as it would make most sense if he was fulfilling the role that Roger would have if he was still alive. However, the truth lies behind Shanks' name and the conversation that drove him to tears when sharing words with Roger all those years ago. Luffy is not an agent of Shanks, just like Shanks is not an agent of Roger. But in both instances, a tender moment was shared that changed both of their lives. Shanks imparted the power to change the world onto Luffy, and Roger told Shanks the truth about the celestial dragons and his own family. Obviously, both pirates then decided to sail the sea on their own to find their true destiny, though, ultimately, the rushing tides of fate cannot be stopped. They both have a role to play in this 800-year lapse in progress, and they will face each other. It's not like this is something we have to theorize about either. Luffy said it himself. He's going to take down all the Yonko. Whether it's a Davy-back fight or just a clash between the two, a meeting with Shanks is near at hand, as well as the truth of the world. If you think this theory is half-baked, that's because it is. The point of this video was just to have a discussion. So yeah. I've been spending too much time on this video. If people want the full theory I have about Shanks' backstory and how he's going to play a full role in the end, drop a comment or something. I know I hate saying that. But god damn it. If people want to see it, I want to know. So I don't want to spend time on something nobody's going to look at. That's practically it. So if nobody believes this and I'm just crazy, then yeah.